MG, another potty, just you and me, mate.
Brother, I've been so excited to get back on, man. I definitely, you fall in love with getting to spend like an hour sitting down with your best mate, just talking about, the things that you love the most. So I feel excited for today's potty. To be honest, man, and as a lot of people, a lot of listeners know who have been in contact with me, I've been sick as a dog,
Yeah.
bedridden all weekend, man. I had the nastiest cough and then this like relentless fever, man, which, was waking me up multiple times a night, having to change the t-shirt I was wearing because I was sweating that much. And I just started to come out the other side of it yesterday, man. So do you remember on last week's episode, I might have just
Yeah.
before, and I don't think I spoke about it on the app, but last week's app, I was like, a bit under the weather, bro.
Yeah.
Oh man, it rocked me hard. So Thursday, Friday, were tough. And then you know how I've got that heart condition, right?
Yes.
So I've got AF. Probably some of the listeners know it or have it as well. It's reasonably common and easy to manage, but because the cough was so relentless for 2 days, the Saturday morning from just coughing so much and having a fever, my heart went into that irregular heartbeat.
Oh no.
Yeah, so it's happened many times. Sometimes you've got to go to hospital and get a shock to get it back in, and sometimes, yeah, I know it sounds stupid, right? And sometimes it can auto revert with some medication and some calming techniques.
Hmm.
So Saturday morning, man, I was borderline calling the ambulance because I was like, oh, if this doesn't revert on its own. And I actually decided I wasn't hungry, but I'm like, I'm going to try and eat something and see if the eating will get me back into a normal rhythm. So that with some medication, and then I did some breathing and stuff, and I actually ended up reverting back. But yeah, man, rough weekend.
Wow, that's crazy.
Rough
That's
weekend.
that's crazy. Other than that, over the weekend we had the Olympia,
Yeah, man.
and you and I haven't discussed it, so I don't even know what you're going to say, what you're going to think. But let's just go straight to open bodybuilding. Tell me your thoughts.
Well, look, it was exactly how we predicted it, right? We both said Derek. We both said Samson Hardy 2-3, but we weren't sure which order. I think so. But there was a lot of controversy.
Mm,
There was, I think Hardy was clearly the sharpest.
yes.
I think a couple of areas, if anyone who's like, oh, how could you really tell? Look at like the chest striations in every shot. He was by far the sharpest, and just the overall abdominal separation. And then he definitely like matched through the glute through the hamstring. Whereas I felt like the other two had areas that were peeled inside out and some areas that weren't quite up to scratch with Hardy.
Hmm.
So seeing it on the day, I thought probably Hardy was the better athlete,
Yeah.
and probably deserved to win. And then, yeah, man, I was trying to score all the shots, right? And they all had shots that were like the best. I would have thought like Hardy was the best from the front. Derek was probably the best from the back.
Hmm.
And, Hardy and Samson, from the side, they're just so big, man. Like
Yeah.
Samson's legs, man, are just so epic,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I would have hated to have had to have been the person that was judging that, but I probably thought Hardy was the best on the day. But then he didn't do himself any justice by walking off. I know he'd finished, and I know he was frustrated, but if he just had held out for that, that extra 2 minutes, that last photo, I thought walking off wasn't the best. I know he's got a hearing impediment. Maybe he didn't hear, but yeah, I know. Like if you look at last year, it was the other way around. Derek was one. He was one. Derek was two, and he waited the whole time. So I just thought if he had just stayed on stage, it would have been great.
Yeah. I actually agree with you, to be honest, about Hardy potentially should have still won.
Yeah,
Um, like if you look at it this way, like obviously last year Hardy was better than Derek. They both improved, but did Derek improve more so and leapfrog
yeah,
Hardy? I
yeah.
don't think so. And when you look at the physiques, you think, where are the gaps? Like, where's Hardy's gaps? Like,
It doesn't have any.
maybe he could have been more conditioned from the back slightly, like through the glutes and hams, but muscularity, he doesn't really have any gaps, whereas Derek still has gaps. Like in
Yeah,
his front double, his upper looks great, but he just doesn't have the quads, doesn't have the legs. And then
yeah.
there's some still think like his chest develop, like there's still gaps there. I just think like a Mr. Olympia really shouldn't have many
Yeah.
gaps.
And then there was the other controversy with Derek, which was obviously the swelling or the potential, whether it was like a couple of bad injections or whether it was actually synthol. So if everyone saw the bubbles in the lat, and then also there was a couple of bubbles on the glute. But like if you're someone who's enhanced, you're probably going to have some lumpage through the glute if that's one of your regular sites. But yeah, those two lumps through the lats
Yeah.
that were sort of circulating on social media. Don't know how noticeable they were in person. Obviously, on the internet, you're always going to get the clearest shot of it, right? Someone's
Yeah,
going to find
sure.
a clear shot. But is that a complete package if you've got two big lumps of oil noticeable? So that was the other thing. But I still thought Hardy was the best. But man, even some of the other divisions, I want to say that that classic top five,
Mm.
those guys, they were all, man, I know Classic's, coming a long way with popularity and maybe he's one of the most popular, but they were all inside out, man.
They were the most conditioned. Like,
Like they were awesome, man.
yeah, Seabum, clear winner, but the others are getting close. I think
Man,
the gap is closing for sure.
they were all awesome. And if you go right up to seventh, who
Yeah,
was like, Wesley Visses, he was in seventh.
yeah.
And you look at his front shot with his quads, like there was more separation and detail there than there was in any of the open guys. Like, and I'm talking seventh, you know what I mean, in classic. So
And that's what I think with Bumstead. That's one thing he gets beaten on is
yeah,
the separation in the legs
yeah,
from the
yeah,
front.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The others just like I don't know if you saw Urs, but
Yeah.
he was third.
Yeah,
His
he's
legs
awesome.
are crazy conditioned.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's what
Classic was elite, man. You can see why people want to watch it and support it, and just
yeah,
such a great division. Not just the posing, right? Because a lot of the open guys are now starting to do some pretty cool posing routines as well.
yeah.
But just the aesthetic of Classic was fucking awesome, man.
One thing I noticed too is definitely Bumstead did it, but I'm pretty sure most others is now it's a vacuum for every pose.
Yeah,
Front double's a vacuum, everything front lats it's a vacuum, everything's a vacuum from the front.
yeah. It
Everything.
just makes that waist look so small, right? It's
Yeah,
like it
yeah.
is,
They're never crunching the abs down except for if they're doing like an ab shot. But
and they don't let it go either, man.
no, no. It's like that's the way you have to pose if you're doing classic. It's a vacuum for every pose that you can from the front.
For sure, man.
Yeah, it's
And
crazy.
then, yeah, like we can go through all the divisions, man, but like obviously I love bikini. Bikini was awesome. The quality was top notch.
I
Last year's
think
going to come in second.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think Jen Dory just had every aspect was just slightly better.
yeah, just looks slightly bigger to
Just
me.
slightly more muscle, better conditioning, better shape, better flow, better posing. Just every little aspect was just better.
Yeah, she was
Um,
awesome. Man. In my opinion, she was flawless.
yeah, it's hard to fault her.
Yeah,
And
she
then
was.
obviously Maureen's still absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
Second place, previous winner. And then Laura Lee,
fourth. I think she was fourth.
no, Ash, you're right. Ashley was
Ash was third. Yeah, Ash was third. Yeah,
third. So Ash was probably the smallest out of that top three.
yeah,
Yeah, and then Laura Lee was fourth, and just a bit too big. So
yeah,
I think that yeah, I agree with the decision for sure.
yeah. It was awesome to watch. They're all so amazing, man. And I'll tell you what sucks, man. When you look at like the prize money, like you think about how hard someone like a Laura Lee works to get fourth at the Olympia and get 7 grand. It's like
Mm.
I don't know, man. I think it's bullshit. Like I think like Maureen comes second and gets 20.
Hmm.
It's like they need to do something to and this goes all the way through. This is not just like men versus women. Like why
Yeah,
does Sam get 50 but Derek gets 400? Like I think there needs to be
yeah,
a little bit more aligning with the prize money because anyone who's got to that level, regardless of your category, the level of work required is 24/7, 365. So I think that's something that they definitely need to look at. And I think they were charging what 75 US a head for the live stream. So
I was just about to mention that. Did you hear about Arnold Classic? They're going to
yeah,
make it free. Everyone now will watch it. And also, too, is imagine on YouTube when people are reviewing it or watching it live, they can actually have the video up on the screen. Whereas currently, because it's pay-per-view, it's
yeah,
privacy
no,
copyright. You
for
you
sure.
can't have the video on the screen on YouTube.
And announcing it on the day of your opponent's show is like the hardest thing you could ever do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I think that's the best move by the Arnold for sure
yeah,
to
yeah.
have it free. It's gonna be crazy. Great move for sure.
And then last one, and then we can get into some questions. But my wife and I have been a Ryan Terry fan forever.
Men's
So like
physique.
we don't watch a lot of bodybuilding on YouTube together, but when we do, there's a few people that are like very tolerable
Mhm.
and who actually put out decent content and like Ryan, if anyone watches Ryan Terry on YouTube, he takes you into his family life, like with his wife, with his kids, and like he he's a big realist and like he's been grinding at that for like a decade, man.
Yeah,
But he was like if you look at his abdomen and how tiny his waist is, and like look at the skin folds where the bottom of his abs are, man, he was dialed.
it's fat free. Yeah,
He was like, like people say, I want to look dry. That's the look I bet people are trying to get when they say they want to look dry. And anyone
yeah.
who's on Spotify, I'm doing those two little fingers up hands. But he was awesome, man. And like that's a decade of like grinding at that. I think the last couple of shows he's been like 10th, 11th, 7th,
Mhm.
12th. Like he's come a long way, man. But his improvements were insane.
Yeah.
And it
Well,
couldn't have gone for like a better bloke.
yeah, well-deserved winner for sure. Otherwise, I was at WBFF on the
Oh,
weekend
awesome. Yeah,
on the Gold
I
Coast.
saw a bit of it, man. It looked like a extravaganza, man. It looked awesome.
Yeah, so it was at the Star Casino, like amazing venue, obviously. I stayed there, so it was super convenient to go to
Yes.
the show and
Back
go
up
back
to
to
the
the
room
room
if
and
you need to.
have a lie
Yeah,
down
that's right.
or some food or something, which I
Awesome.
did. It was great. Like WBFF shows are definitely entertaining. Some amazing physiques, but there was obviously some exciting news that came out of the back end of
Mm.
that in the last couple of days. So obviously WBFF Australia have separated from WBFF and created their own federation. So they're not affiliated with them anymore. They've gone their own way for a lot of different reasons. A lot of things just didn't align to what their beliefs and the way they wanted to conduct themselves. But they're actually not going to just be an Australian federation. They're international. So they actually are going to be having shows all around the world, which is super exciting. From what I've been reading and what I've been seeing, is they're going to have some new categories and new divisions, which is exciting. Also, too, is they're going to take away that marketability criteria from the judging. So, with WBFF, there's a beauty and fashion component. So they want to take away that beauty, and that's why they're calling it fitness, muscle, glamour. So it's still going to be, glamorous, the bikinis, the dresses, the theme wear, all that kind of stuff, but not so much about, your beauty and your looks and your marketability from that aspect. It's going to be more about the physique, which is great. So I'm really, really keen to see how season A goes and the new divisions, and if the judging or the look changes in any way, because I've definitely got some people lined up for next year to jump into that new federation. So it'll be super exciting. But yeah, definitely big news. All the existing pros so far that I know of have converted over their pro status to,
Was that an option?
I guess so, yeah. Like,
Like that was going to be my question. Do you know if you could say, I want to stick as a WBFF pro because that's where I earned it, or I become this new Federation pro, or whether it was just mandated?
I think it would be optional. It'd be up to that competitor whether they wanted to. Obviously the offer would be there to translate across. But if they wanted to stay as a WBFF pro, there'd be nowhere to compete in Australia because that federation no longer
Yeah,
operates.
they'd only have to do international shows here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
okay.
from everything that I've seen, all of them have converted across. And we're talking some big names, like all the big names you could think of. So
Look, man, ultimately, if it's gonna, potentially entice more competitors to try a brand they weren't going to before, I think it's a good move. I mean, federations change and adapt all the time, right? So anything that sounds like it's encouraging more people to become part of it, I think is going to be fruitful for them. I think it's a great decision. I mean, if I just think about conversations I've had with people that I coach or are associated with friends of mine that are coaches like you or Scott, for example, that was probably the part of that fed that they weren't competing because they didn't
mhm.
feel like they wanted them, they didn't have the aesthetic of the face or the hair. You know what I mean? So I think it's a good move.
Yeah, I think the reason being is because it's all to do with the people that ran WBFF Australia. Like they are the same people. They're the ones that are converting across or changing the name or rebranding it.
Yep.
And people are doing the show because of them. So they're changing over because of them. So you know how when people found out you were promoting A and B, they were like, well, I want to support MG. He's a great guy. I love everything about him and how he presents
Yeah. So they're
himself.
supporting the promoter.
We're supporting the promoter, not so much the
The
federation
brand.
per se. It can
Yeah.
be called whatever. They're supporting the promoter. So that's why
Makes sense. Yeah.
having good people in the industry and having good promoters makes the biggest difference. And that same thing happened with when INBA became ICN and there was that separation there. It was basically a rebranding or a renaming, but all the same promoters and everything was exactly the same. That's why that transition was seamless. Everyone just came across because it was the same people and they were there for the
Yeah.
people, not because of the INBA name or brand per se.
Yeah.
All right, let's move into some questions because we've got a fair few, so let's go over it. I'm going to start with some coaching ones first, right? So the first one was, do you charge competitors to attend a show?
Yeah, definitely not. Actually, I had someone who I just started with last week, and this was one of their big things that they had been charged in the past. Let's try and break it down a little bit and like give both sides of the story. Neither me nor you nor really anyone that we kind of associate with charges to be there on show day. I think someone who's charging you to be there on show day is saying, all right, well, if I've got to come on a Sunday, that's a day of 8 hours or whatever. Sometimes these things can drag out. That I'm not getting paid for. But ultimately, my philosophy is this. Well, you should probably factor that into whatever your weekly charging fee is, because for me, and we say this all the time, when I'm there at a show, we go to shows where we don't have athletes competing just because we want to watch the fucking show, right? So I don't feel like that is work. And equally, if I've invested 20, 30, 40, 50 weeks into you, how the fuck do I not want to be there on the day when you put all that hard work up on display? Whether you place, don't place, I don't care at all. I want to see you on that stage, ticking that goal off that we set 40 weeks ago. If I was to miss that, that's a no-no for me. So I understand from a monetary perspective why people are trying to charge. I think there's smarter ways to do it. I think you should reevaluate your weekly fee potentially. But if you're willing to miss your athlete's show and they've invested 30 weeks with you because you want to charge $150, I think you've got a bigger problem.
Yeah, you're making the coaching transactional, not a relationship.
At all.
Yeah, and why would you ever miss the show day? It's the most important day. And you need to coach them too. Like, they need coaching and guidance. So are you not going to coach them through that day where it's the most important day, and you can be there, you can give them feedback? We know how it is, right? Things change on the hour.
You've got to manage. What about nerves and expectations alone? Also, tell me this, man. Both of us can agree with this. How many clients have you got that weren't yours from being at a show?
Yeah. Like, if you want to, we get inquiries all the time, and sometimes in the inquiries they're written, "I've seen you on a show day," and the level of attention and detail you give to clients is something that I want and I need. So, the coach may not be getting paid for that day, if you want to call it that, or whatever that may be, but they may potentially get other clients that's going to pay for it. Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
Man, me and you fly up interstate regularly and pay for our own flights.
I just went to the Gold Coast, spend $1,000 on accommodation and flights, and I had one client.
100%.
I wanted to be there.
Man, and I take my hat off to you. I think that's great. You and I do that regularly. Look, part of the thing, man, it's like you enjoy it so much that it doesn't feel like you're going there and it's a burden. It's such a joy to be there. And I could just not miss. Like, man, this year I was supposed to go to the Maldives. I flew by myself. My wife and Amy flew the day before. I stayed one day just to be there for Matty Papa to do his physique show.
Yeah. And you know what? Everyone that I've spoken to that has said that they've had to pay for a coach to be on a day, it's put a bitter taste in their mouth.
Yeah, I get that.
Every single person. So what? Like, it's not serving you well. You may get $100, $200, whatever that may be. And the thing is too is most coaches don't even pay entry to a show, so they're getting in for free anyways. And then if you have multiple athletes, what are you doing? Like, I had.
Did you take 100 off each, or do you?
I had 11 athletes at NBA. I had 9 at ICN. What do I say? Everyone give me $10 each. Like, what? And then if I've only got 2, they're going to give me $50 each. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
Look, that's our opinion. People might feel differently, but everyone I've spoken to that've had to pay their coach to be there on show day have not been super happy about that. And I actually think some of those people have moved on from their coach too. So.
For sure. I wonder if it's communicated at the start of prep or whether you only find out towards the end when it's like, well, what do I do now?
So from the ones I've heard, it's communicated like right at the end.
Yeah, that would be even worse.
And it's a shock. It's like, okay.
What are you going to say? You're that deep. What do you do?
Yeah. Yes. Someone's told me about theirs, and I said, tell them that you can't afford it, and see what they do. Are they going to rock up still?
That's a good one. It's like, I
can't afford it.
That's interesting.
Maybe try that next time. Anyone that.
Yeah, just say can't afford it and see if they do come anyway.
Yeah, and then I'll probably come anyways. Okay, let's move on to that. Do you celebrate each other's athlete success, or even success of other people that aren't on our team?
100%. All the time. I mean, for us, like me, MT, Scotty, anyone in that sort of circle, we always celebrate each other's athlete success. We message each other's athletes congratulations. We also get involved in the process. Like, we look at photos sometimes and we give each other positive feedback, and it's never like a competition as to who's doing the best. What we love to see is that the most amount of people possible are having fun, loving the process, and improving themselves to the point like, so I might send a message of congratulations to somebody else who's done really, really well, who, is a listener of the podcast that had some great success, just a message of congratulations, you did well and you deserved it. And that's simple as that. Anything that we can do when we've got a platform like this to raise other people up or to make other people feel proud of themselves, 100% we're going to take that opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. Like we support each other's athletes, but also people that aren't in our three teams, whether that be on a show day or online. We support other coaches too. Like I'll have a coach next to me at a show and be like, man, she looks amazing. Like, well done.
For sure.
Congratulations.
For
And
sure.
it's about that. There's like I get it, it's a competition, but we're here to help everyone, right? We're here to make sure everyone has a great experience and wants to stay in the sport. I've been at shows recently, and these people listen to the podcast, so they know who they are, where I've said, you better do the pro show because you're going to get a pro card. You better do it. And they did. I've had other people that have approached me at workshops and said, what division should I do? And I've said, I reckon you should do this division. And I'm telling you out of your own good. And I'm telling you, you're going to beat my athletes. Like I'm telling you, you're going to beat them if you do this division. It's meant for you. And that person got a pro card and an overall pro win. We're doing it because we want to help everyone, not for
not for any
other reason.
gain.
And we're not like those people aren't now our clients or anything like that. Like we encourage their coaches, we support their coaches. It's that's why we do this podcast too, right? We're here to help everyone and make sure that everyone enjoys bodybuilding. And if we leave this sport, hopefully we've left it in a better position than when we found it, right?
Sure. For sure.
So, we're definitely.
I think everyone's can see that the biggest thing that we try and encourage is the uplifting of people around us.
Yeah.
Whether that's via providing constructive feedback, whether that's just by patting someone on the back or telling them what they did really well, we will go out of our way to make sure that if somebody deserves something positive, that we pass that on to them, whether you're on my team or not on my team.
Yeah. What do you value the biggest accomplishment with clients? So what's like some of the biggest accomplishments you've had with clients?
Well, I'll tell you what I value in a client, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something that to me is a big accomplishment. It's not an award, it's not a place, it's not a pro card. But you know what I love to see in clients? It's a good word for it. Those athletes that are just unbreakable,
resilient,
unfazable, right?
Yeah.
No matter what you throw at them, no matter what they've got going on in their life, and even as a coach, you can see that, they're going through some struggles or they're time poor because, let's just say they're a single mum, they've got kids, or they're going through some work struggles, or they're going through a separation. But when you deal with them, when they ask you questions, when you do their check-in, when you get their feedback, you wouldn't know it because they just persevere. They've got this drive mindset of just like, I've just got to keep progressing forward. I've got to keep progressing forward. That to me is like one of the biggest things that I value in someone. I love to see it, man. It inspires me. It makes me work harder too, to see someone that, I'll use the word, is unfazable. And I think the more of us that can try and become a little more unfazable, the more we can all accomplish.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I value the most in a client. From an accomplishment standpoint, I think we mentioned this on another potty, it's about the transformation. Physically, mentally, transforming their life, their mindset, and then coming out the other end a better person, and then saying, this is the person I want to be from now on. That's the biggest accomplishment.
Yeah, like a complete change in... Yeah.
They could have not even placed. It's got nothing to do with their placing. It's the fact that they've transformed their life and they're trying to be the best person they can be. That's what I consider a true champion. Someone that is not... It's not about the placing. It's about being your best self and wanting to be your best self.
Yeah.
That's the biggest accomplishment for me with clients.
Yeah, it's well said, man. It's a really, really good point. I think that there's some of the greatest moments that I've had. I might have even mentioned on last week's episode, like one of our athletes sent a message to our group basically saying that her whole life has transformed for the better and that she was in a really dark place before getting into comp prep and is in complete charge of her life now.
Love that.
And it's like, that's the best type of cup you could ever hold.
Yeah, 100%. How do you build trust with a new coach?
What do you reckon, man? It's good.
Sometimes there'll be some automatic trust because, obviously they've become your coach. You must trust them in their judgment, in their education.
Yeah, do you reckon the question is like, how do you trust your coach, or how do you kind of build trust so that your coach trusts you? Or maybe we can look at it both sides anyway.
Well, they said, how do you build trust with a new coach? So obviously you must trust them slightly if you started with them, because you must trust their judgment, their education, maybe their past athlete successes and accomplishments and things like that. But I think trust takes time. That's with any relationship, right? It's just going to take time, and for them to prove to you that they got your best interests at heart, whatever that may be.
Yeah,
I think that's as simple as it is. It's just got to take some time. You just got to allow it to build naturally.
Yeah, and I think go back to, your initial catch up with that coach, and like, what did they say they were going to do? What did they say they were going to provide for you? And are they providing that? And I think also, just making sure that you have open lines of communication, and that if there's something that you need to give feedback on, that you give that feedback. And then is that feedback heard and dealt with? Because, sometimes things change, sometimes things need to change on the plan, or like something as simple as, maybe there's an exercise in there that you just can't do, or it's just not sitting right with you, or you never feel it in the right spot. It hurts you when you do it, and you didn't want that in there. It's like, oh, have you told the coach and had a conversation about it? Because maybe after a good conversation, maybe the coach will make a change. So like, just that you're able to communicate, trust each other enough to have a decent conversation. And sometimes there's changes that need to be made. But ultimately, from the other side, if you're asking, how do I build my coach's trust? From your side, it's like, just do the things you said you were going to do. Be adherent, be open, and be honest. That's it. Those three things.
Yeah, because a coach has to trust you that you're executing and saying what you're saying you're doing. You're being honest.
Yeah.
So honesty is going to play a massive part when it comes to trust too.
Honesty and adherence, those two things, which are kind of the same anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
is kind of the other side to that picture.
Okay, next one. How important is competing to each of you? So how important is competing to you?
Oh, this is a good question to say. I'll tell you what, competing isn't that important. The lifestyle process, the consistency in the tasks that I complete are really, really important to me. The actual competition itself, and I've said this before on the show, is not the most important thing to me. Actually, standing up on stage is probably the part of the process that I love the least. But what I cannot live without, which is right at the top of my list, is everything that happens before that. The journey, the training, the nutrition, the adherence, sticking to the plan, having goals, accountability. All that is the most important piece to, me professionally and personally, other than my family. But the competing itself is quite far down the list, man.
I love how you answered that. You separated competing, like on stage competing, being competitive against other people and placings. You kind of extracted that out and said, okay, that's not important, but the actual process of being a competitor and an athlete is important to you.
It is, man. Yeah.
I looked at it at like a bit of a higher level is it important if I actually ever jump on stage again and go through the comp prep process? The way I answered that is it's not the most important thing to me, to be honest. Like, I think being a good person, a good human, and I think that, making sure I'm a good person to my family and friends, to you guys, giving back to the community and educating others and being a good coach, they're probably a little bit more important than me actually going through a prep and getting back on stage. But it's still important to me, so I still want to do it. I'm still going to put energy and effort into doing it for sure. But it's not the most important thing in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. I think my brain was like, right, if someone said to you, you can either do this or compete, or you can do this or compete. It's like, well, there's probably a lot of things that would fall before competing. If someone said to me, oh, you can't train and eat like a bodybuilder anymore, or this is like, oh, now you're starting to trouble
That's
me,
a different question. Yeah, that's different. Yeah, it's totally different.
Yeah. And equally, I'm sure there's people out there that, competing is one of the most important things because, if you've had some success or, even if you haven't had necessarily success in terms of placings, the journey of standing on stage can be such a beneficial one, particularly if you're someone who's come from one place of like upbringing and composition, maybe where, you didn't get a lot of acknowledgement or positive reinforcement, growing up. And then you go into a comp and you get all this amazing feedback. Wow, you look incredible. The photos, messages on Instagram nonstop. You can see how that for someone might be really important. So there's no right or wrong answer. It's just, I think it comes down to like personal history.
Yeah, and my answer would have been different 10 years ago, and it will be different 10 years from now. So just from different situations, yeah. Okay, let's move into some reverse recovery phase questions. Macros or a meal plan post-comp? This person's on macros and is struggling to adhere, but they've never been on a meal plan. They feel like a meal plan would help them with their adherence. Thoughts?
I suppose the mentality is this. If you think about what a coach would prescribe, it's like, okay, well, you've just come out of a comp prep, jumping on a meal plan, giving yourself restriction and being on just the same 5 or 6 meals every day. Is that really what you need after dieting for, say, 26 weeks? Is that going to be the best avenue to go down? Maybe it is. Again, it's so individualized. It would be dependent on the athlete. But as a coach, if an athlete had that conversation with me and I saw that they were struggling, and they wanted to give that a go, I would be open to giving it a try. Again, it would be based on the athlete, their experience, their history. But again, there is no right or wrong here. This is the thing. one of the things that we always say in bodybuilding, unfortunately, it's so individualized. But do we both have athletes that come out of comp and go on to plans and go on to macros? I'm sure we have both, but I don't really have anyone that goes from macro tracking onto a plan.
Yeah. So if you've been doing macros or prep, you stick to macros. If you've been doing meal plan or prep, you stick to a meal plan. But I've never had people go from macros to meal plan. I've had people go from meal plan to macros, which has been super successful. But all I would say is the added benefit of a meal plan is structure.
For sure.
And that's what you need. So whether you're on macros or a meal plan, you need structure either way. So I always tell all my competitors that coming out of comp prep and into a reverse is, here's your macros, but I want you to set out a day of eating, what it looks like to hit those macros. That's essentially your meal plan. That's your structure.
And then we'll provide feedback.
And then from there, you can, have some flexibility and make some small changes, but that's your structure. That's your going in position. So whether you're on macros or a meal plan, you need structure regardless. And you need to know what it looks like to be adherent to your plan so that you know if you're wavering, how far you're moving from that path.
I think where a lot of competitors fall over post-comp is they just allow too many off-plan meals too early.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what happens is you have one off-plan meal, you don't track the rest of the day. Mm-hmm. The next day you get back on plan, someone invites you out for dinner. You're like, I'm going out for dinner, so you don't track the rest of that day. And all of a sudden, 5 or 6 days have gone past. You've actually got no idea what you've been intaking because you've only quarter and half tracked all 5 of those days.
Yeah. And
now you're looking at yourself, you're feeling a little fluffier, you're feeling like you've probably gone a little bit too quick. It's just because you've probably allowed yourself a little bit too much freedom. Mm-hmm. And a little bit of freedom post-comp is totally fine. I always say to my team, was like, work off that one off-plan meal a week in that first phase, mm-hmm. right? You just went 28 weeks with none. So I think one a week for a couple more weeks would be totally fine. Build yourself a little bit of a platform and then you can develop that from there. But I think, where a lot of people fall down is they just go too hard too soon. So my piece of advice is don't plan everything that you're going to eat at every restaurant in the first 2 weeks post your comp. Save it all for a little bit later down the track when you are fully recovered, feeling a lot better mentally. And, you don't want to have an off-plan meal every single day.
Yep.
So like this, MT, I'll ask you this. In your peak off season, we obviously go out for one meal a week, right? Friday night, Tuesday, everyone knows. How many other days do you want to have an off-plan meal on that week?
Maybe one other.
Maybe one, right? But you're not like, I need to have it because
I don't need it.
You're full, right?
I don't need it. It depends what I'm doing socially. But normally, like max, it's going to be 2 untracked meals a week max in the off season.
And this is in peak off season. So that's what you're trying to build up towards.
Yeah.
If you're having 5 a week in your first week of reverse diet, you can see already the problem there, right? I'm talking about building up to 2 untracked meals in your peak off season. So why are you having more than 2 in your first 2 weeks of reverse diet? Simple as that. All right. Use that as a good system.
Yeah. And again, like even peak off season, even now, I know what a day of eating should look like. I know what to fulfill my macros, what that looks like. So I know exactly where I need to be. For instance, I'm in a pre-prep fat loss phase at the moment. I've chopped off a couple of kgs already in about 2.5 weeks. I went away on the weekend, stayed on point. Like it's not hard, right? So obviously timings of meals are a little bit different over the weekend and things like that, but it's fine. Like I still got all my food in. I actually came back lighter. So it can be done. You just got to put in the energy and effort to stay on track.
Just don't be in a hurry. Don't be in a rush to eat everything. All those places will be there. Take your time. I'm telling you, you'll be so grateful you did.
Yeah. So we've got another question on the flip side. I found the reverse diet easier than the prep, but everyone is saying how hard reversing is. I almost feel like I'm doing it wrong. Well, I find a lot of people find it easy too, if they're doing all those things we just mentioned.
Yeah.
If you're finding it easy, but everything is structured correctly, like you're not being put on an exaggerated amount of food and in your plan there's actually like 5 untracked meals a week, then of course you're going to find it easy. But if the plan is appropriate, right, and it's taking into consideration that there's a stepwise, a strategic approach to put body fat on and gain weight, and the plan is appropriate, and you're finding executing that easy, then that means that you're just doing all those things that we've mentioned today and we've mentioned also in the past about making sure your physical environment, your support environment, your mental environment is all stable. Your routine structure, schedule is very, very similar to what it was in prep. You're eating very, very similar meals. Like if you're doing all those things, reversing is easy. It also depends on the type of person you are too. Like we've kind of mentioned the other weeks why did I and you find it easy? Because we're not foodies. Like we don't even in the off season, we're not going out all the time. So we don't feel like we're missing out. So therefore in reverse, it's kind of same old, right? So maybe this person's finding it easy because they're that personality type. And also they're doing all those things that we recommend and we coach people on and we mention. But other people, they find it hard for probably all the reasons of what we explained, and they're doing all the opposite. Or maybe their plan is not appropriate. Maybe they're not put on enough food and those kind of things. Maybe they're not being coached correctly. Maybe they actually weren't given a plan until 4 days after their show, which happens, right? So it really depends on those kind of things too.
Yeah. And I think it also depends on your relationship with yourself. I mean, in theory, it should be easy, right? If let's say I dieted and I got down to 1,600 calories in prep and I go into my reverse and I'm starting on 2,300, I just did 1,600 for 12 weeks. It should be easy in theory. But where the issues are is the little bit of added flexibility where it's like, okay, if I go a little bit over, it's not the end of the world. Where this person might be finding it easy is, let's say as your coach, I said to you, hey, we're going to try and put on 3 kilos in the first sort of 16 days because we're going to, you've lost a lot of weight. We're going to try and reverse some of that. And you've got numbers to hit. So you hit your first 16 days, 3 kilos goes on, and you're able to, even though you're fluffier, you're still ticking your goal. If you're that type of person that's happier with the outcome of achieving my goal rather than the aesthetic look of my body, maybe that's someone who's finding it easy. Mm-hmm. I think for a lot of people, they relate doing well and success with being lean. And I think as they start to reverse out and put a little bit of weight back on, people can be really hard on themselves unnecessarily, even though they're actually doing the objective of what the reverse/recovery diet is, put on a little bit of weight. I had a competitor this week who was like, disappointed, didn't see the scale go down. And they actually had an amazing week. They adhered beautifully. They pretty much ate to within 1% of all of their nutrient targets. They lifted the most they've ever lifted in terms of gym numbers. And I said, I want the scale going the way it's going. I don't want it going down. I actually want it slightly trickling up. So you've actually had a perfect week, but they were a little bit disheartened because the scale didn't move because of how good their week was.
Yeah.
Actually, you did do the right thing. It went the way we wanted. So I think understanding what the objective is in each of those kind of blocks, or at least having a bit of a target as to say what amount of weight you want to put on by what date, can really, really help you feel successful in your reverse diet.
Yeah. All right. We're going to go on to another one. Completely been binge eating the last 3 weeks post-comp. What damage would I have done to my metabolism? I'm already 8 kilos up. Can you fix the damage? Kind of spoken about. I don't know if you're on that episode we spoke about.
I was.
About the want to do a mini cut post comp because I put on too much weight. Yeah. So we discussed this a little bit. But what I want to say is, okay, so you're 3 weeks post comp, you gained 8 kilos, you've been binge eating. That's in the past. There's nothing you can do to correct that now. I don't want you to think like something's damaged, like something's broken, like it needs to be fixed. Especially metabolism. The only thing that's happened is your metabolism hasn't caught up to now what your body fat and body composition is at the moment. So now you're weighing, let's just call it 60 kilos, but you're on less calories and you're probably got more body fat than what you were when you were 60 kilos in the off season and you had less body fat and you want more food. So not that you've damaged your metabolism, it just hasn't caught up to the weight you've gained. Also, you got to remember, if we pull all aspects away from the metabolism, because you've got obviously your gender, your activity output, and some other genetic factors that have a part to play with your metabolism. But one of the biggest things that we all have in common with when it comes to metabolism is driven by your muscle mass. So the reason why you are on less food but you weigh more, it's because your muscle mass also hasn't caught up to what it was at the 60 kilos that you were in the off season when you're on more food. So your metabolism is only going to get better as you put on more lean muscle mass. What that means is you're going to put on more weight, sadly enough. So you're not in a position where you can now fat loss diet because you're on less food and you weigh heavier. If you try to cut food now and try to go into a fat loss phase, you got nothing to cut from. Your engine hasn't recovered. It's not burning as good as what it was in the off season when you're at the same body weight. So you've got to wait for it to catch up. You've got to slowly increase food over time and get stronger, make gains, put on muscle mass. And then when you're at a level where you're on enough calories that are in a great position that you can now cut away from, that's when you can start to worry about fat loss. you can't worry about fat loss at the moment. Your body's not in a position where it's going to perform well if you try to put it in a fat loss phase. So there's no damage done. It just hasn't caught up to where it needs to be at the moment so that you can be successful in any kind of fat loss phase.
Yeah. Also, if you've been binge eating for 3 weeks, putting yourself into a fat loss phase or trying to what you would call fix what you've done is only going to put you back in the exact same position.
Yeah.
So when you say, can it be fixed? You're actually fixing it as we speak. You just haven't, you've gone about it one way versus the other way. And ultimately, the only thing that's going to fix, some of those cravings, binge eating episodes, is putting on a little bit of fat mass. And as MT said, unfortunately, the road ahead may look like you getting a little more uncomfortable before you start to get to the end of the tunnel where you start to see that light. So just be patient and do your best to, stick to as close to your plan as possible as often as you can. But unfortunately, time is really the only thing that's kind of going to heal through this. So just make sure you've got a really good support network around you and have honest conversations with your coach.
Like, people binge eat for a lot of reasons.
For sure.
But if we just try to narrow it to maybe one or two, the reason why you would binge eat is because you're hungry. And the reason that you're hungry is because you haven't put on body fat to a level where the body says, okay, I don't need to be hungry anymore. We're good. Right. So that's probably could be one of the reasons why you binge ate. And maybe that's the reason why now you've stopped, because you've actually put on enough fat mass. The body's now happy. But you could have also been binge eating from all the other things we mentioned about, your structure, your routine, the types of foods you've added into your diet, not keeping things consistent. There could be all those reasons. We're talking about the mechanics, right, of the reasons why you're hungry and the reason why you binged eat. There could be a lot of other emotional reasons why you did that. Sure. And mental reasons why you did that, which we won't go into. But look at those things first too. Set a really, really good, solid foundation so that you don't have those episodes again. You really need to start creating a base. I always tell everyone, like, whenever they're going into a new phase or come off from going away or whatever that may be, where they haven't been adherent, is we need to create a baseline now. We need to create a baseline. We need to create a foundation now at which to then make adjustments from. So for that person, create your base, create your foundation, and then see where you're at, and then know what the next path is. Are you in a position where you can do a fat loss phase? Most likely not. You've got to keep pushing in food a little bit over time, getting stronger, performing better in the gym, making some gains. The only positive thing about what they've done is, if they were training really, really hard during that time and they were in a big calorie surplus, they probably made some gains. Like, they probably made some muscular gains.
Their strength curve is probably like flying up.
Yeah. That's the probably only positive to do with that at the moment.
Well, I mean, and let me just say, take that as a positive. Like, if that's the only thing you've got to cling to from that block, embrace it. Go in the gym and train like an animal. Like, make it count.
All right, let's go into some first-timer questions. When coaching a first-timer, what are some daily non-negotiables?
I think having a set routine. So I think mapping out when is going to be your training time, having a set time that you're going to wake up, and then I always say, which I think is one of the things that maybe gets a little bit put to the side, is I think having what MT spoke about before, which is like a baseline of a nutrition system that you can map out your meal timing. So you've got a rough idea as to what times of the day that you're eating, so that you're not going too long without big gaps in eating. And then all of a sudden your hunger levels start to creep up, which will leave you susceptible to things like not just energy deprivation, but potentially overeating episodes as well.
Yeah.
I always like to get a big chunk of my expenditure out early. You did a lot of your steps at night, didn't you, during your prep?
No, I mean, I had a lot of steps to do, so so I'd do a bunch in the morning and a bunch at night.
Yeah. So I think just having that planned out, sure, things are going to change day to day. Things come up, or you've got to be somewhere where you didn't think you had to be, and you might have to make a plan. But I think the best thing you can do is have a set daily plan and routine for each of your 7 days of the week, and do your best to try and stick to it. Once you make that habitual, prep becomes so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
It really, really does.
Yeah, you make a good point, because my mind goes, non-negotiables are sleep, diet, training, steps.
I'm talking about habits, like
all those non-negotiables can only be done if you've got a routine, right?
Sure, man.
So actually the routine is the foundation to then tick off the non-negotiables that you would see in prep. As I said, sleep, training, diet, steps.
Sure. Like, as far as what time are you going to try and get in bed? Like, have that like down somewhere. I know a lot of competitors use a whiteboard. I'm a big fan for a whiteboard. They've got their 7 days mapped out. It's like I'm training pull, push, legs, rest day, bang, steps in the morning, training, like putting it all on a board or a piece of paper or even a doc on your computer and printing it and having it up in front of you is a really, really useful tool, especially for a first timer. The more comps you do, The more seasoned you are, the more you can kind of, wing it a little bit more. And then there's going to be other factors. But if you're a busy person, you've got a full-time job, potentially you've got kids as well, I think really mapping out your week can be very, very helpful.
We had a question about advice for first timers in prep for their mindset. So we spoke about like non-negotiables and structure, routine, all that kind of stuff. But what about upstairs, up here? What about their mindset for a first timer?
The most important thing is to remember that when the journey started for you, or when the bodybuilding / prep journey started for you, you've got a big goal in place, right? So never ever forget that end goal, because it's really easy to slip out of your mind when you start to feel the prep feels, feel the suck. So I think from a mindset point of view is always remember why you started, and just continue to expect greatness from yourself, and always try and push yourself to try and achieve a little bit more, and never become complacent. I think, and what we spoke about earlier, right, is we want to make this normal in the sport now, is become unfazable. How do you learn to be unfazable? That's something that we should talk about. Maybe not today, but at some point.
Yeah, I think from a mindset perspective for a first timer is, yes, remember your why, remember why you're doing it. Don't put pressure on yourself. A lot of people, and we hear about all the time, is along the way that we're like, yeah, you're going to kill this, you're going to win this. And they put a lot of pressure on people. So don't feel the pressure. Don't compare yourself to other people. I know it's not easy. It's easier said than done, where we see people on social media all the time. We go like, oh, I'm going to be competing against this person. Why? They have this over me. They have that over me. Don't let that get into your head, because we see it all the time that someone looks great on socials and then it doesn't come together on a show day. So you're not a judge. Don't try to think about where you may place on the day. Just stay in your own lane. Trust your coach and trust yourself. And just be your absolute best. Just worry about yourself and no one else, and just be your absolute best. I think also share your mindset with the people around you, so that they know that you're focusing on something, and that maybe you're making this a priority at the moment, so that you are focusing on this. It's going to be super important. Maybe socially you might be different. Maybe to your partner, to your parents, you might be a little bit different. So I think that helps you lock your mindset in, so that you don't have to be worrying too much about whether people around you are noticing changes, and maybe you're upsetting people. At least they know what to expect with what you're going through at the moment. And just trust yourself. There's a plan, follow it, trust the process, make sure you put in the work, make sure you're ticking off all the non-negotiables, make sure you're practicing your posing, making sure that you're planning in advance and you're getting everything prepped and ready to go, and you're not leaving things to the last minute, things like that. So just, as I said, don't put too much pressure on yourself, and just try to enjoy the process. Even though there's going to be some difficulties, just try to enjoy it as much as you possibly can. Because as we always say is, we want a first timer to come out the back end of a show and be like, that was amazing. I can't wait to do this again. So try to set yourself up for that outcome when your show it does end. In terms of stage presentation and judging, how much emphasis is actually placed on color design of bikini? It's a first timer question. I've never seen, if we're talking about IC and NBA, A and B, I've never seen much judging feedback that it's ever been negative towards someone's color.
I want to say I've never seen or heard a conversation between, someone who's been heavily involved in a federation. I've never really heard a conversation between judges relating to somebody being disadvantaged or moved anywhere in the placings because of the color or style of bikini. But I will say this, in the men's divisions, I have definitely seen guys wearing the wrong trunks for the wrong categories that has cost them to be penalised. So wearing bodybuilding trunks in a classic division.
Sure.
But from a bikini standpoint, the colour, the style, no, I don't think it's going to sway the judge's opinion. Ultimately, It's a physique sport, not a clothing sport.
Yeah, if we're talking about WBFF or FMG now, that might play a bit of a role, because there is a presentation aspect to it, and it is heavily judged. But that's why they have different bikinis, different cuts, and different suppliers for those federations. So as long as you stick to what's commonly there, then you'll be good to go. And as long as it's not so way out there outside the boundaries, we think of typical bikini colors, they're going to be red, green, purple, blue. Sometimes there's a yellow, sometimes there's a pink, sometimes there's a white.
No color is going to disadvantage you.
Yeah.
Unless there's the color and potentially if you've had a deleterious coat of tan and they just don't mix well together, like you get washed out because of the tan and the bikini, maybe. But like if everything was perfect and it was just a matter of color, it wouldn't change anything.
Yeah.
Like I've had girls win shows with bikinis they've made themselves, and I've had girls win shows who've spent $1,000.
I had someone in season B that put their own diamantes on their bikini.
There you go. So like, I don't think for the feds that we mainly discuss on this podcast, I don't think it matters.
Yeah. Okay. One more first-timer question. I'm a higher body weight and want to compete. Realistically, how long should I give myself? It's a very open-ended question. I think the best thing you're going to have to do is speak to a coach so they can assess your physique, see how much body fat or body weight you have on you, and they can give you a realistic guidelines and process to follow. If you are overweight, you probably need to take some of that off first. If your metabolism, everything's in a good position, we're talking about like, imagine the foundation of baseline is great, then you probably want to chop away at some of that if you're overweight, so that you get back to a nice, comfortable off-season weight, and then operate at that body weight for a while whilst going through off-season, gaining muscle, building metabolism, all the fun things we do there. Then you would start a comp prep. The timing of all that is going to have to come up to, again, what you look like, what division you want to be in, your stature, where you hold your body fat, and then going from there. It's a really difficult to give like weeks and months kind of answer, but that would be my recommendation for sure.
Yeah.
What do you think?
The only like example I could give you is like if I use, say, a seasoned athlete that, say, one of the coaches, my gym coaches, who's done many shows, this athlete would start their prep at, say, 63 kilos and aim to achieve a stage weight of somewhere between 49 and 50. And that would be done somewhere between 25 and 28 weeks.
Yep.
Right. So that's 13 kilos, 13 or 14 kilos across, say, 28 weeks as a rough guide. So like if you've got more to lose than that, then potentially you're not going to be able to do that in a prep. You're going to need a couple of phases to get there.
Yeah. So that's a good point. So if we were to give someone numbers, round numbers, it's different for everyone. But, let's call it most females in the off season at a decent body fat level are gone away round about that. Let's call it 60, 65, maybe even high 50s. They're kind of around there, most commonly, right? There's some that are higher, some that are lower. Most of them are going to probably lose around about the 10 to 15 kilo mark, depending on whether it's bikini fitness. But let's just to give you some round numbers of where typically most people are for a female in their off season and typically what their stage weight is. Yep. It's around about a 10 to 50 kilo loss depending on the individual. But hopefully that gives someone some round numbers.
Yeah, I just thought it'd be good to have a very approximated but like pretty average example.
Yeah. Let's finish on... Actually, let's go to this one and then we'll finish on one more. Do you think all natural feds should bring in polygraph testing?
Yeah, man. I have never done it or seen it. I'm going to see it this weekend in person because we're going up for the AMB DFAC Worlds and it's mandatory. So
yeah,
I want to see it and get some feedback from some people doing it. I think it's at the athlete's expense. So another cost to add to the overall pricing of prep, which is funny because we were talking about what a prep's going to cost just last week's episode as well. Yeah. So add that in as well. I think they're about $150. I haven't really seen any of the like feedback or data on it, so I can't really comment. But what I can say is like I know that as someone who's ran shows, the urine tests are expensive. So
how much is a urine test?
It's about $300, man, per athlete. Yeah. So if this is a way to do more tests and it allows the federation to test more athletes, both winners and randoms, I think it's a positive. Again, it'd just be a costing, but just fair for people, and a lot of people probably don't know. If you think about this, if it's going to cost $300 to test every athlete, and you go to an ICN show, and you go to a Victorian show, and let's just say for round numbers, Tony's got 200 athletes. If he was to test every single athlete, you can just see the cost. It's almost like the cost of running the show is gone by testing every athlete. It's just not possible. So that's why you see at a lot of shows, federations testing overall winners and just random people. So if this is a way to do more tests, I think sure. But I don't know, man. I don't really know enough about the polygraph. What do you think? It seems so like fucking James Bondy to me. Like
so much like CIA shit. I think if it's accurate, fine. Like that's great because urine test is is accurate for what it's testing. Can you come off substances and get around urine testing potentially? Can you get around a polygraph? Can you get through lying? I reckon it would probably be harder. That's if the test is conducted in the correct way to pick up someone that's lying. I just don't know. Like, I've heard that a proper polygraph has to go for like half an hour, 20 minutes.
Yeah,
These
these are
ones are
quick.
more like an express one. So
They are. They're super express. Yeah.
yeah, so I don't know how accurate that makes it. Does it really catch people? Yeah, I'd have to look into it a little bit more. But whatever works and is cheaper and you
Sure.
can get more people, I'm all for it. But let's just see what happens. All right, cool. Let's leave it there. We've got the Nationals this weekend. It's the last show for the season for all of us.
Yes, man. Yeah.
We're going to Sydney, flying up on Saturday midday, back on Sunday night after the show. Who have you got going up?
I got Matt and Fran both on the pro show.
Perfect. I've got Romany, Sarah, and Kim, all in pretty much fitness and sports. Yeah.
So same. I just got Maddie in fitness. So looking forward to it, man.
I'm actually, people are like, are you excited for this weekend? And I'm like, I'm actually excited just to hang out with MG. Just
I
like
know, man. I've been
us to
messaging
travel
you saying
together.
we finally
back.
get a bit of a weekend away, which is nice. It'll be good, man. And we'll actually have a little bit of free time on the Saturday too. Won't be rushed. Normally we get in 6, 7 p.m. at night, and it's check in and eat and go to bed. But we have a few hours up our sleeve, which will be nice.
Are you going to train Saturday in the morning?
No, I think I'm going to leave it. We'll do it when we get there.
Oh, you want to do it when we get there?
Yeah, just because we're going to have a ton of time.
Okay, cool. And then are we going to go out on a date on Saturday night?
We're going to do Sydney Souvs. No, you're on a diet, aren't you? No, well, we're probably
I'm on a diet, bro. Sorry, man.
we're probably going to have cream of rice in the room, but that's all right. I'm okay with that.
I'll go out for a tea and a coffee with you for sure.
Yeah, that sounds good. We'll do that.
Coke Zero?
That sounds good. Anyway, I will get into this off air because I want to start.
Okay, cool. Yeah, people are going to be like, what are these guys up to?
I'll message you later. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
See you
everyone.
next week. Have a great week.
We'll chat soon.
Take care.
Bye.